All right, welcome everyone to the third webinar in the Building Equity in the Silicon Valley Food System Professional Development Series. Our host for today is Lovepreet Kaur with Valley Verde. So Lovepreet, I think whenever you are ready, I think we're all set to begin.
Thank you, Lucy. Hey everyone. So today's the third webinar called Food, Culture, and Power. And thank you to everyone that's already taken the poll. Laura, can I get the next slide, please? Oh, okay. We have the poll up again. So if you haven't had a chance to answer, if you could just take a quick moment to do the poll. In the meantime, on the bottom of your screen, you should see something that should allow you to choose the language that you would like to listen to the webinar in. So please go to the meeting controls, click interpretation, and click Spanish or English. And it looks like based on the poll responses so far, majority of the group that's here does participate in mostly cooking and eating, our favorite parts. So instructions for this webinar: if you are a participant, please keep yourself muted, except when you are in small group breakouts. Use the chat for questions and comments. And if you need technical support, our organizing team is here to help. So please message either Lucy Diekman or Laura Wilmer about any technical difficulties. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. We already did the welcome. So the next thing we're going to do after this is a stretch with Joe. So super excited to get that started. We are also going to do a quick recap from last month's webinars for those of you who didn't join, or the ones that did join but want to learn a little bit more or want to just refresh what we learned last time. We will then go into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes to discuss a few topics. And then we will have our panel discussion with our guest speakers for today, Rupa, Maria, and Kristen Leach. And then we'll close at the end. So I will give it to Joe to lead us into the stretching activity.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It's 3 o'clock. It's time for us to stretch. If you've been sitting at your desk all day like me, kind of sore. Okay, so we're going to do our famous coconut stretch. You know how much we love that. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a C to our right. Oh, big C, big, 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 big. Stretch, stretch. Can you feel it? Oh, yes. I totally can. Okay, awesome. And then in the middle, we're going to do our big O, wide arms. Wide, wide. Stretch those shoulder blades. Yes. All right. And then, okay, the other side. Left, another C. Oh, that's good. I don't know about you, super tight today. Okay, and back in the middle, another O. Another O. Yay, big and tall. Oh. All right, and then we're going to do our N. So it means you're going to bend down, touch your toes. Give me an N, everybody. I'm disappearing. Yes. Big back stretch. That's good. You feel it? All right, and then we're going to do our U. Arms out wide. Out wide. Awesome. Okay, and then our T. All the way. Reach. Wiggle your little fingers. Go all the way over there. Yes. Let's do some little wrist rolls, because I know if you've been on your mousing all day, we need our wrists flexible. Oh, that's good. Fantastic. Good for you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. And we will now get started with a little recap of from webinar 2. So some of the things that you all shared that you learned from the last webinar were land access / ownership, redlining and housing policy, Asian immigrants and agriculture, disparities and inequities in Silicon Valley, and the history of discrimination in housing and food. And the actions that you all said that you would be taking after the webinar from last time was advocate for social justice and equity, sharing information with others, connecting locally with the movement, advocate for equitable and affordable housing, and um, super exciting, but someone said they would be voting to repeal Article 34. So today, the guest speakers that we have will be touching on some other topics that are part of our food system. So some of those topics that they will be that they are part of our food production, distribution, aggregation, and marketing and market development. But this is part of the food system that we are using currently, not necessarily that it has every component of the food system. So a little bit about Valley Verde. Valley Verde is a nonprofit organization located in downtown San Jose. Our mission is to promote food access and increase food access in our community by providing underserved families with by building backyard gardens for underserved families. And our main focus is on culturally relevant seedlings. We really want families to be able to connect to the culture, either that they grew up with, like the food that they grew up eating. Maybe their grandparents were the ones that came here, and now they have lost that part of their culture and don't know how to cook certain items or certain foods. So by teaching families and by making those vegetables accessible, we are hoping that we can increase that access and be able to connect families to the culture, their background culture, and hopefully continue that on in the future generations, especially as they're growing up in California. And being able to connect to the culture is a big part of who we are and what makes us unique. So some of the ways we do that is through our programming. We have programs for underserved families that can participate in the program for about a year. We also have other programming as well for families, but that is the beginner level that families can come and join us. We also have a homeland nursery on site, so any community member that wants to come in and wants to purchase culturally relevant seedlings can stop by and purchase those. If you also just want to be involved and learn about those, you can also come to our site and visit and volunteer, or just attend some of our community workshops that we have on site as well. And we can go to that. Thank you so much, Laura. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put everyone in breakout rooms. The questions that we have for today for you all to discuss are, is there food that is no longer accessible to you, whether it's not for sale or it's no longer available? And do you have a personal food memory associated with it? And the second question is, what connection, if any, is there between food and culture for you? You don't have to discuss both of those questions in your breakout rooms, but feel free to choose whichever one that closely, well, interests you in the majority of the group that you're in. So Abigail will be helping us. Will be putting us in those breakout rooms. It'll be about 15 minutes, and we will let you know, give you a 1-minute warning before we pull you out. So
yes, I'm making the breakout rooms now. And if anyone prefers a Spanish language breakout room, stay in the main room. That's where we'll be having the Spanish breakout room. Thanks very much.
Right. Laura or Abigail, could someone drop the questions for all the breakout rooms as well, just in case? Thank you, Lucy.
Is this the Spanish or should I move to another?
Yes, this is a Spanish group.
Yeah, this is the Spanish one. I'm just going to end the interpretation so that way Natalia comes back to the main room. Let me go find Natalia. I think she ended up in a breakout room.
Hola, disculpe, ¿este es para el grupo hispano?
Sí. Voy a traer a Natalia. Bueno, también yo puedo hacerlo. Ok, entonces, si van a participar en el grupo en español, si pueden mantener su cámara prendida o si no van a participar, dejar de prender su cámara. Sí, Migdalia.
Yo voy llegando a mi casa hasta ahorita, en 8 minutos, en 5 minutos estoy llegando, por eso no puedo prender la cámara, pero sí quiero participar, entonces voy a llegar primero y prendo la cámara para compartir lo que están preguntando. Gracias.
Perfecto, no se preocupes. La primera pregunta es, ¿hay algún alimento al que ya no tenga acceso, que ya no esté a la venta, que ya no esté disponible? Y tiene un recordatorio personal de comida asociado con un alimento, algún alimento.
¿Yo puedo compartir?
Yay.
Lo primero que se me vino a la mente fue una fruta, la guayaba. Y bueno, entre otras, pero las otras sí las puedo encontrar aquí. Yo crecí en Cuernavaca, Morelos, México, y donde vivía siempre hay muchos árboles frutales y teníamos en particular uno de guayaba y poníamos un columpio y ahí era nuestro lugar para jugar y estar con los primos, vecinos y pues comer las guayabas. No sé si estamos hablando así como de comida, platillos, pero sí, para mí sería guayaba que no está pues disponible en lugares cerca de donde yo vivo ahorita.
Wow, qué bueno recuerdo. ¿Alguien más?
Pues yo puedo compartir mientras voy llegando, ya prendo la cámara. Creo que soy hija de campesinos y crecí en medio del campo y siempre alrededor de las casas están los frutales y recuerdo mucho la guanábana. Es una fruta que no la he podido conseguir nunca en este país, pero es una fruta tan nutritiva y tan bendita para el organismo de las personas que tienen cáncer, que creo que es una fruta que se debería de pronto buscar la manera de buscar esa cosecha en este país. La he preguntado en tiendas mexicanas, en tiendas de vietnamís y no la hay. Pero es una buena fruta, sobre todo lo saludable y muy exquisita. Y se pueden hacer postres con ella, jugos. Viene la semilla que es grandecita y alrededor de la semilla viene la pulpa, que es blanca. Uno le quita la semilla Hay que quitar esa semilla para luego licuar bien la pulpa con un poquito de azúcar. Es muy nutritiva y también se puede consumir así nomás, sin necesidad de hacer ningún procedimiento para darlo como alimento. Gracias.
Migdales, busqué así rapidito en la internet y veo que también le llaman chirimoya y creo que en unas de las paleterías Michoacán hay paletas de guanábana, pero sí, no es muy común.
Bueno, chirimoya nosotros es otra fruta, es muy parecida, pero no es, la chirimoya es más pequeña para nosotros. Digamos, yo soy de Colombia y la chirimoya es pequeña, tiene otros nutrientes también muy importantes, pero la guanábana es grande y en nuestro país es un fruto aproximadamente de 15 a 25 centímetros de largo. Es muy nutritiva. Entonces, creo que puede ser, aquí, no sé, me tocaría revisarla. Gracias por esa información.
Gracias por compartir, Migdalia. ¿Y quién más quiere participar? ¿Hay alguien más?
Creo que el mole también no se encuentra en muchos lugares. I mean, sí hay, pero no tanto. Y, yeah.
¿Alguien que quiere compartir algo más? O vamos a la siguiente pregunta.
Bueno, yo quiero compartir otra hierba que es muy... ¿Alguien va a hablar? Por favor, siga, que yo ya hablé. Gracias.
No, puede hablar. Oh, no, Vera.
Sí, bueno, está bien, puede por ahí decir lo que de la hierba después de yo. Yo también estoy en la misma, estoy manejando, entonces por eso me tardó un poquito, pero para mí, yo soy de Bolivia y nací y me crecí ahí hasta que tenía como 10 años y para mí lo que extraño y que no puedes encontrar aquí es toda la diferente tipo de papa que hay en Bolivia. Hay tantas diferentes, tenemos como 200 diferentes variedades de papa y aquí solo encuentras como unas 8 diferentes variedades. Pero nosotros tenemos la papa deshidratada, la papa roja, morada, chiquita, grande, todo tipo de tamaño y color y como función hasta, porque allá en Bolivia, si tratas de sacar una papa incorrecta para un tipo de plato, como que te riñen, te dicen, no puedes agarrar esa papa es solo para sopa, o esa papa es solo para cocinar al horno o algo, y es bien diferente. Y una memoria que tengo de cuando era niña es comer el chuño, que es la papa deshidratada que tenemos, y eso se hace de una manera bien especial, porque como se hace en el altiplano, con la nieve, la sacas, la pones en la nieve por 3 días, después la vuelves a meter y después la sacas otra vez y es un proceso que haces así para deshidratar la papa y después te puede aguantar más tiempo y es más liviana y todo. Y me acuerdo que cuando era niña no me gustaba el sabor, pero ahora que estoy más grande, lo extraño y ahora como que lo quiero y no lo puedo tener porque no se puede traer porque es papa con cáscara y no se puede traer la cáscara, pero sí es algo que extraño harto.
Muchas gracias, Vera, por compartir eso. Vamos a la siguiente pregunta, que es, ¿qué conexión, si es que hay alguna, existe entre la comida y la cultura para ti?
Pues yo creo que están súper conectados. Nuestra cultura y tradiciones dictan las comidas tradicionales. Depende de la cultura, el ambiente, lo que se da a cosecharse, lo típico. No hay una sin la otra. Para mí, están súper conectados.
Hola, mi nombre es Claudia. Para mí la conexión de la comida y la familia es muy importante porque lo primero que aprendí a cocinar fue lo que cocina mi mamá, y ahora también significa mucho la cultura, no nada más mis raíces de mi familia, pero también mis raíces aquí como hija de inmigrantes. Aprendí primero cocina mexicana y ahora cocina americana, pero también de otras culturas porque estoy expuesta a varias culturas aquí en San José. Entonces, la comida para mí significa quién soy yo, que es una mezcla de diferentes culturas.
Voy a compartir un poquito, pero para mí la cultura y la comida, como dijo Claudia y Gloria, son muy conectados y creo que también son un modo de pasar información y esos sistemas que han tratado de quitarnos esa comida o partes de nuestra cultura y más como con sistemas como colonialismo que trató de como borrar esta parte de nuestra historia, de nuestras familias y creo que la comida es nuestras recetas y la medicina que viene de la comida es la resistencia de nuestra cultura. Eso es en lo que me hace pensar esta pregunta. Gracias.
Gracias por compartir. Ay, sí, Migdalia.
Espera, es que me desconecté un poquito. ¿Cuál era la pregunta?
Ah, sí, es acerca de la conexión que existe entre la comida y la cultura para ti. Si alguna conexión existe y cuál es.
Bueno, la comida siempre está muy arraigada entre nuestras culturas porque de alguna manera, cuando uno estaba pequeño y tenía un dolor de estómago, usted cogía la cola de la cebolla y la freía un poquito en un sartén y luego la colocaba en sus manos y al estomaguito del bebé, de nuestros hijos. Medicina, un alimento, tanto para el consumo como para la salud. Si te quemabas o te cortabas, el café. Y así, ahorita no me acuerdo la hierba tan famosa en Colombia, se me confundí, no la tengo presente, pero es una hierba donde nace un árbol muy grande y con ese árbol, con las hojas de ese árbol, cientos de personas que estaban presas en la cárcel fueron sanadas del COVID con esa hierba. Ahorita voy a colocarlo en el chat cuando me acuerde, pero fue muy saludable y salvó vidas. Entonces, la conexión siempre la vamos a traer y sobre todo que uno le transmite a nuestros hijos toda esa tradición y va llevando ellos a colocarle la cebollita en su estomaguito al niño para que se sane y hasta la fe ayuda tanto que se sanan. Hay un árbol especial donde uno, por la tradición, cuando hay una hernia en el ombligo, los nombres no me están acordando. Uno entierra imaginariamente y por fe el ombligo dentro del hueco de ese árbol especial y la hernia se cura. Pero eso es pura cultura y fe de que se va a dar las cosas así y seguramente va a seguir esa tradición a muchas generaciones.
Gracias por compartir.
La cultura cura.
Sí, la cultura cura. Bueno, ya regresamos todos a la misma sesión, entonces vamos a continuar con nuestra sesión entera. Y voy a cambiar la interpretación. I'm about to change the interpretation back to English to Spanish.
Thank you, Natalia. I hope everyone enjoyed their discussions as much as we did in this room. So now we are going to start our panel discussion. So Rupa, Maria, and Kristen Leach will be presenting next. And Rupa is a physician and founder of Deep Medicine Circle. And Kristen Leach is the founder of Namu Farm and Second Generation Seeds. So really excited to hear everyone. If you are a speaker, please make sure that you speak slowly. So as we do have an interpreter, and it will help them in translating. So please slow down as you're talking. Thank you.
Hello. Just so I'm aware of how much time, just to remind me. Anyone?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay, thank you. My name is Rupa. I was born and raised in the South Bay in what used to be apricot orchards. I used to climb those trees and steal the apricots when I was a kid in what is now Mountain View. There by the El Camino Hospital. I was born and raised in a time where there were orchards in Mountain View and cherry trees and apricots. And my ancestors come from Punjab in India. And when I would go home to be with my grandparents, my parents were immigrants from India. My grandmother had mango orchards and lychee orchards. And so my childhood was spent with like a bunch of comic books hiding in those trees and eating the fruit and spitting out those pits. So it was not a surprise for me to come to, back home to California and do the same in the orchard in Mountain View, much to the chagrin of the people who were trying to sell the fruit, who had to scare me out of the trees. But I grew up, just from ancestors who are both Sikh and Hindu, and from my Sikh tradition, the process of feeding people langar, it's a sacred thing we do, is to take care of each other and to make sure that everyone has enough to eat. And growing up in this area, I was very sensitive as a child to, going back to the homelands with my grandparents, feeling the presence that was there always in the food, in the culture, in the people, in the land. And then coming here and feeling a presence that didn't really make sense when I looked at the strip malls and the 280 and the highways and the buildings, and the culture didn't feel like the presence that I could sense as a child. And that was very confusing to me. And it wasn't until I started really getting involved as a musician. So I'm an artist, I'm a composer, and a doctor, but it was my work as a musician when I started to really listen to the land and started to spend time in the areas of the South Bay where I could connect with and feel that presence. And that was in the oak savannas of the hills, of the foothills. That was in the redwood groves and the bay groves. And it was as I grew up and started to ask more questions about what that presence was that I learned about the presence of the native people and cultures that were here before colonization. And it was shocking to me that I had gone through the California education system and learned about the missions and learned about, we've all made dioramas as if that happened long ago. But we didn't learn about the state-ordered genocide of the California Native people. We didn't learn about how people went into hiding with their identities. We didn't learn about the rich and diverse food systems that were here for thousands of years, and the ecosystems that developed with the beaver and the salmon and the grizzly bear and the elk and the antelope and all the beings that made up the rich diversity of this area, including the people that were stewarded by the people and cared for by the people. And so that learning when I was in my late teens and early 20s really opened my mind to thinking about how colonialism has impacted every aspect of ourselves and our bodies and our understandings of who we are. For me, as a person of diaspora, who was brought to this land by the same forces that created the very horrific genocide of California Native people here. What has been beautiful and an incredible part of my life has been the gift of learning alongside California Native people who are still here and who are working to reclaim their lands and reclaim their food traditions and reclaim their medicine traditions and to let everybody know that they're still here. And so that partnership, working with California Native people, learning alongside California Native people, and just learning about the land where I'm from was really catapulted by a tour I did in 2012 with my band. Our band is called Rupa and the April Fishes, and we travel all over the world. And we, travel for 8 hours on a plane and be in another country and, play music. And I said to my band, what if we just spent 8 hours going by bicycle instead? Like if you really want to know something, you walk it or you bike it. You power your body through it. And that's how you learn a landscape. That's how you learn to listen. And so I said, what if we did, instead of going all the way to Asia or Europe or somewhere, what if we just really learned about the bay? Because I was born by the bay. This body of water is this energy that impacts all of us. What if we just take a tour around the bay and we go on bicycles? And we worked with a group called Rock the Bike and another band called Shake Your Peace. And so we had 15 musicians with all of our gear on bikes. And these bicycles turned into a pedal-powered sound system wherever we went. So we were able to play at Stanford University. We were able to play down in San Jose on a Gordon Biersch loading dock to 3,000 people on bicycles. It was awesome. So it was a whole bicycle music tour. And when we did this, we learned about the work of Karina Gould and the shell mound walks that she was doing in the East Bay. And I learned about the shell mounds for the first time, about how people would be living in these places that were sacred sites, and these and just these huge structures surrounding the San Francisco Bay that were then destroyed during colonization and used to make landfill and used to build tennis courts on top of and make our shopping malls on top of. And so learning about Karina's work and then learning with some other Ohlone community about the histories here. One of the folks from the Costanoan tribe down south asked that we go with a member of their community to sing and pray to the water every day. And so that's what we did. So we sang, our band of like 15 people from all over the world sang alongside this California Native person, song to the water every day. And after 8 days of doing this, I felt so connected to the water. And I thought, like, I've been around this thing my whole life, and now I'm here in Fremont. By the time I'm in Fremont every day, I feel like 8 hours, we could like however many miles with all of our gear on our bikes. And this work of reconnecting in this way just truly opened my eyes to our needs as people living on stolen land to connect the dots about why we're here, to understand that when we're farming in these lands, we're making our living off of somebody's stolen lands and these ancestries of stolen labor and stolen land. And so how do we be here in the right way? What are the right ways to be here? And so this tour ended and my connection to the Bay was forever changed. I then met my now husband, who's a farmer, and these questions got even deeper about what does it mean to farm on land when we're talking about sustainable farming or ecological farming. Why do we not talk about it in relationship to how we correct what has happened on the soil here? because the soil is a living entity and the soil remembers. There's memory, there's living memory in the soil. And so that is the work that we're doing with the Deep Medicine Circle, is thinking about, can we take a system that has been built upon violence and extraction and create and imagine a system that is built along care and healing? And that is the work that we're calling Farming as Medicine. And I just want to share the framework with you all so you can see. Can I share my screen? I'm going to hit share screen. It's going to get weird. Hopefully you don't see my million tabs that are open. Let me see how I do this. First, let me find my tab so I can share this with you. But this work is an opportunity to think of how to take a system. What farming is and has been a mode to take land and to put structures on it that control nature and that make the earth work for us. And I was, and my husband Benjamin Farr, we're part of a community that want to see how we can enter different kinds of relationships with the land. So if here we go. Can you all see this? This is from our website. You can check this out at deepmedicinecircle.org. But here on the left side, we see the food system today. And by that, I mean not the awesome farming that Kristen Leach is doing, and I'm a big fan of their work, but the agricultural food system that we are seeing grow more food than ever on planet Earth, leaving more people hungry than ever before on planet Earth. So our food system today is not about feeding people or caring for people. It's about generating profit to a small number of people in these large agricultural corporations. And what happens through this extractive system, as you could see here on the left, is that you have a lot of things kind of spinning off in terms of energy. You get poisoned air and water and soil. The soil has been damaged. If you look at all the water running off right now through the Central Valley, the top soil in the Central Valley used to be many dozens of feet deep. But through the extractive practices of industrial farming, we have lost that soil fertility and the fungal elements of the soil that glue soil together and make it act as a sponge. So what we're seeing on a windy day is soil aerosolized in the air and people getting sick with valley fever. Over the last 20 years of being a physician at UCSF, I've seen more and more people coming in with coccidiomycosis or valley fever, which is just soil microbes in the air that now people are breathing in. That should be held in the soil, but the soil can't hold it when it's been damaged through the fossil fuel-based inputs of industrial agriculture. You get water running off. So that's what we're seeing right now, is further damage and exacerbation of the damage. The water can't sink and stay, it runs. You get a damage to the microbial biodiversity. You get decreased yields in our food, so they have to pump more fertilizers in to get more the same yields. You get farm worker exploitation and exposure to these chemicals. And you get erasure of indigenous people and their knowledge of how to be and live well in these areas. And the outcomes of that we're seeing are catastrophic floods and catastrophic fires, right? And so we have to understand that our presence as non-native people in these lands has been deeply destructive, and there is a better way of doing it. And so what we're advancing, our Farming as Medicine model that you can see on the right here, involves land return to Native people. So we are working on a 38-acre farm in San Gregorio on the San Mateo coast. That farm is a beautiful spot. So we're working with Ohlone community to return it to indigenous hands. The farm is currently owned by Peninsula Open Space Trust, and we're involved in seeing how we mobilize privilege to return the land. And then part of the site is being farmed through ecological farming, blending agroecological practices with traditional ecological knowledge or tribal ecological knowledge in terms of stewarding the riparian corridor or woodland forest that borders the San Gregorio Creek. So what we see here as outcomes, what we're looking at is if we return land back to Native people and we reframe farmers as stewards of our health, both in how they take care of the water and the soil, but how they grow nutrient-dense food through agroecology. What happens, right? If we then give that food away for free, so we're decommodifying the food. If the system we see to the left is driven by the violence of colonial capitalist arrangements of power, the system we're advancing is a system driven by care and politics of care. So if people are hungry, they should be fed. And if the agricultural system we see today produces waste, we produce very little waste, but all that delicious food is eaten. Through our practice, we're also seeing climate adapted seeds. Food becomes what it is again, which is a probiotic and a prebiotic. So there's microbial richness in the foods that we're offering to community, and we give it all away. And so this work is exciting to me as a doctor, as someone who has watched people coming into the hospital who go straight to the ICU with COVID were people with high levels of markers of malnutrition. And so the people who were most impacted in the Bay Area were Latino community, Black community, Indigenous community, those same people who've been impacted by all the structures of colonialism. And so that is the work that we're doing with the Deep Medicine Circle. All the food that we grow goes to community groups who distribute it in San Francisco. We also have a 1-acre rooftop farm in Oakland, which is the largest rooftop farm in the west of the Mississippi. All that food is also liberated from the market economy to be given away. So we see a future where our farmers are really paid and supported as stewards of our health as a service. We believe food should be a public utility. If we live together in community, our cities, our counties, our states should pay for people to have full access to 100% organic food, because then we get the climate benefits that the farmers offer us in their stewardship of soil and water, which is benefits for all of us. And then we get the food so that nobody has to go hungry in a place that has more billionaires per square foot on planet Earth. So that is my work. And I'm very excited to share it with everyone. Anyone wants to come visit the farm, it's called Tekwe Anawadep, which means honor Mother Earth in the native language. And the rooftop farm is called the Rooftop Medicine Farm in Oakland. I'm learning how to farm now. It's been the most awesome thing and humbling thing. It's another living system, just like the body. And it's a joy to watch my patients receive food that they know was created with love and care for them. Part of the work we do is surveying the community every season to ask what they want to eat. And that has been so cool because we're serving, indigenous Mayan people in East Oakland, largely Chinese community in San Francisco, indigenous elders through San Francisco, partnership with the American Indian Cultural District, Latino community, all these different communities from different cultural backgrounds. And everybody wants something different. And so we try to grow heirloom varieties of the ancestral foods that people want that they can't get access to. So we grow those foods for them. And what was interesting is at first people were like, oh, we don't know what to do with that food over there. But then the native elders in San Francisco asked us, well, can you teach us? Can you give us some recipe cards? So we're starting a 5-ingredient recipe challenge where we have chefs coming up with, whatever's coming up off the field. We're making a recipe card that will share the cultural knowledge of the different communities that we're serving so they can learn from each other, which is actually really beautiful. And what I love about the Bay Area is that we have an opportunity to learn from each other's beautiful, rich heritages that are here. And so that is the work that we are doing. And thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Rupa. That was really, really fascinating. Kristen, if you're ready, if you want to.
Sure, thank you. Anytime I get to be just like in a room with Rupa, I'm always like, everyone should just listen to what Rupa has to say. I don't even need to follow it. It's always like kind of the mic drop moment. And so, yeah, just always kind of admire everything that they're doing over there. Yeah, my name is Kristen and I'm a farmer in the Central Valley, and I'm part of Second Generation Seeds, which is a collective, like a collaborative network of farmers, mostly of the Asian and Swana diasporas. And yeah, we're just basically all seed nerds and really focused on kind of that element within our food system. But I think for us, food is just sort of, I think as a commercial farmer, like growing up and working on farms as like a worker and then having my own commercial farm, I think a lot of seed is still fairly obscured, like for folks just in the fresh market sort of zone. And I started doing field trials for a seed company maybe like a decade ago, and just sort of realized that, you know, seed is attached to everything we're talking about in terms of just like the really exploitative parts of our industrial food system and the really kind of promising aspirational, you know, truly agroecological systems we can work towards. Seed is like at the cornerstone of all of that. And so I think for us, we just got really invested in thinking about that. And I think just kind of the question that was posed to the breakout rooms, this idea of like, what is a food you don't have access to anymore? Like, what is a food that's attached to a particular memory? Like, it just acknowledges the way that food like is just sometimes like the deepest form of care that a lot of us have experienced in the world. It's just that nonverbal sort of love that I think a lot of people just, that's the type of love that you felt like in your family and in your community. And so I think as a farmer, when I started doing this deep dive into seed, like it really alarmed me to think of how much those really kind of precious sense memories and that tether to the past was being impacted and was really truly in peril. I'm going to share my screen. Just, I don't have like a formal presentation, but that's not what we're supposed to look at. Oh, my screen sharing is paused. Let me see. All right, we'll stop that because no one needs to see heredity in tomatoes right now. But yeah, we're just a community-led effort. We have a commercial seed entity, and we're really focused on, yeah, just how wholly unique seeds are in terms of just being these like incredibly miraculous beings that just kind of carry all of this information and this blueprint. It's like the communication we can receive directly from our ancestors. And they're also like our transmission to the future. Like it's everything about like what we hope to bottle up and leave for people that will never know us as individuals. They'll just only sort of feel the imprint of the things that we've left for them. And if we can like make those imprints as full of like love and care and like in assurance that we tried our best to like act in right relationship with all of these other, you know, beings in the world, then I think that's really the aspiration behind it. And so I think, yeah, it's just to acknowledge too, that for a lot of us, it started with hearing a lot of our community just be like, you know, oh, I always hear my father talk about like okra isn't as good here as it is in Burma. And is that true? Like, we just get questioned like, is this true? Like, or is it just like my parents being my parents? And I think when you just really can break down like the ties between biodiversity and cultural diversity, you see just the ways that like we as human species have evolved in all of these incredible ways. But there's lots of crops that just have as long of a genome as we do, right? Like a chili pepper has as much functional space in terms of capacity for like genetic recombination as like a human being does. So if you think about all those opportunities to kind of like really evolve with respect to place, all the climatic conditions that plants like met and tried to evolve and adapt to, and then the ways that we like acted as these interlopers and expedited sort of evolutionary processes by interfering and collaborating, like something striking us as beautiful or delicious or medicinal, we ended up like entering into some sort of, you know, agreement with those plants. And I think we're just trying to restore those sets of relationships to just say, you know, acknowledge the role that plants have to kind of like bring us together. acknowledge too the role that seed will play in terms of like our small agroecological farms being able to withstand the sheer like dizzying pace of climate chaos. You know, like most seed at this point isn't being bred or developed or tested on farms like mine. And there's certainly like a lot of cultural varieties that aren't being developed like with any participation from the stewards of that culture, and certainly not with the economic benefits like returning to those communities as well. And so I think we're trying to bring all of those things together to address just shortcomings in terms of who's participated in the seed industry so far, who by and large is preserving the amount of biodiversity we have left on this planet, which is definitely just peasants of the global majority. Yeah, at many times like in the face of like kind of real intensifying and multifaceted forms of violence. And then also just saying like the way that Rupa was talking about like land access and just like dispossession of land, displacement and forcible migration has been such a driver. Like for me, it's just a large part of like how my community has come to live on this continent. It is just something that is really deliberately designed to kind of like sever us from these stories and these kind of narratives that really bolster our communities. It allows other people's lands to be continually exploited to kind of like grow hybrid seed lots for growers in the US. And so we're just trying to address all of those things, but from a very small position, obviously. So we do a lot of community education and programming through a program called Seed Stewards. And that is meant to just bring, farmers and any sort of eater and families, like community members together to design different participatory breeding processes. So what that could look like is, talking about a crop like okra through the lens of bringing Palestinian and Indian and Burmese communities together to talk about these really particular cultivars, really distinct preferences in terms of how it's cooked and how it's prepared, and then try to build those bridges of like how those preferences play out in terms of, combating genetic erosion, I suppose is the best way to put it. And so, we're mostly just looking at things like that. And we're just trying to also create an economic platform for small farmers to enter into commercial seed production, which I was a contract seed producer for several years, doing wholesale seed contracts. And the margins are just really bad, and it's really skewed towards people who have way more land access than most of the people in our communities. So if you look at just the relative size that most BIPOC farmers have access to, it really excludes you from participating in seed production. And so we work as essentially a marketing cooperative and split profits just 50-50 with any grower. And so, for example, like as a seed contractor for lettuce, I would get paid $70 a pound to produce lettuce seed for like a bigger seed company. And that's about 40 plants, which if you take 40 plants and instead of selling them for the fresh market at $250 a head, you sell it for $70 for the seed, like you're already operating at a loss. And that seed crop is sitting in the ground for like 4 times as long, right? A seed crop is going to take like 145 days to mature compared to a lettuce head, which is like 45 to 65 days. Whereas for us, like, a similar sized crop of 40 heads of lettuce let to go to seed would yield the producer like $2,000. And so we're just trying to figure out different economics to scale so that, small regenerative farmers can participate and have something to diversify some of their market channels too, and just create incentives to do more on-farm breeding and research and development. So we're just trying to make it so that every farmer is better equipped to just serve our communities, make sure that the stories and those memories don't get lost just because no one asked in time what is sort of endangering them. We don't want to look back retroactively and realize like, where did this crop go, which I think is the question that we get asked by a lot of our elders. And we want to just like help participate in creating like a seed world that feels just richer and more robust, and where the seed is kind of like encompassed by this cultural memory and cultural imagination. So I'm sorry I couldn't share my slides, but I'll keep it brief so that we can have more discussion.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So the next part of our discussion is going to be with Joe. Joe will lead the activity of asking Rupa and Kristen some questions.
Thank you, Lovepreet. So, wow, like my mind is just like, oh my goodness, these are so exciting. I'm so excited to hear more about what you're both doing. But I do have a sort of a question for both of you. Would love to hear that. And also, if people have questions, please drop them in the chat. We're happy to address those as well. But my first one would be, so how do you each see cultural practices and foods playing a role in community healing and health and food security? And why don't we start with Rupa?
Man, it's everything. I'll just tell a story. So I have a patient who I've been seeing in the hospital in and out for 20 years. He comes in and out, he has a chronic condition, and he was in the hospital and hadn't seen him for a while, and he had COVID. And he was asking me, oh, doc, how are you doing? Because I'm in a band. He's like, where's your band? How are you playing? I'm like, oh man, I'm not playing music. I don't want anyone to gather to hear me play because they'll all get COVID, right? So I'm like, no, I'm not playing music. I'm farming. I'm like learning how to farm. And I told him about our work. And he said, wait a minute. Are you the ones who brought the organic lettuce to Booker T. Washington? Because that's where he gets his food on Fridays. And I said, well, yeah, that's us. And he said, he got tears in his eyes. And he said, when I saw that lettuce, I immediately felt cared for. I knew it was grown for us. And that to me was like, when I then shared that with our farm team, that love of our community went into the soil and the seeds, into the water, into the way we talked around the plants, into the intention with which we harvested the plants, with which they were packed and delivered. And he felt that. So that's what food, it's like magic, right? So if you have, and that's why farming is like, that's why I'm a big fan of Kristen. It's like you can transform the world if you plant the seeds in a certain way. And those ways that we have been gifted through our ancestries are so powerful. So it's not just in the preparation of the meals, which is critical. We have other community members who have gotten our food, who have said, oh, because it's so special looking, it becomes like a discussion piece of the neighbors. Like, where did you get that speckled lettuce? We grow heirloom varieties of foods. We grow foods that you don't get at the market because they won't survive the transport. They're not marketable foods. They're foods to be eaten and enjoyed when they're grown in a way where you are like an hour away from a farm, right? So they're harvested the same day, delivered the next day. And so when some of these families would get this food, they would start gathering around the table. And we know that families gathering around tables, it already like children's academic success increases. Just that act of like being like, we're going to sit here and share this food together. This is something in our capitalist world where it's like everyone, we're not afforded the luxury of doing that when we have to go and work 3 jobs and our kids have to eat crap that's processed and ultra processed and gives them sickness. So if we're thinking about diabetes and the scourge of diabetes and obesity and all of these things, it's not simply that people are making bad choices, it's that they don't have an opportunity to make a good one, right? And so how can we create the opportunities for people to make awesome choices? And that way it's like, when people are like, oh, kids don't like fruits and vegetables, I dare them to try our fruits and vegetables because those kids come running when we show up. And that's what we want to see. We want to see that community care. So it's not just that we create foods, yes, the cultural foods are critical because they connect people with home and they're relatives of ours from our homelands. When a farmer friend of ours, Zainab, is growing Indian okra on our rooftop. Oh my God, right? Like my mom makes the best okra. I know everyone's gonna say that, but my mom really makes the best okra. And every time she makes that okra, I am like loved up from the inside out, right? And so when we share food with each other, we're saying we value you, we love you. And then when it's coming through these relatives that have been in our lineage for so many years, it's our way of feeling whole. And I think that that's not just a metaphorical idea. It's like when I saw my patient say, I felt cared for, that is a whole hormonal experience, like that's an internal experience of care. And what COVID has shown us, as we watch everyone walk around without masks thinking that it's over, and I'm watching people still show up in the emergency room because it's not, is that we don't give a shit about each other. Like on a fundamental level in this country, we have been taught to not care about each other. Food gives us an opportunity to reverse that in like the most fundamental basic ways. The act of feeding, sharing food, growing food, exchanging food, and preparing it, even just for ourselves.
Thank you so much. That was so moving to me personally. Really, really thank you. Kristen, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to Rupa's point, like we had, I know when I started the farm, we had done donations to the Asian Women's Shelter, because we're like, oh, we want to provide this like culturally specific produce. And we started just having programming where they had asked to come to the farm. And so we started doing storytelling programs there with like a group called Casita, which was for Korean American like survivors of violence. And it was just really amazing because I felt like I understood the importance of like people just having that sense memory ratatouille moment of like, eating certain things and being transported back to their ancestral land. But I just had underestimated how impactful it would be for them to just have a sense of being allowed to root again to a land base. And I think for a lot of them being relocated to a more urban area, like just every Korean auntie is like the most prolific, like any little patch, like pots stacked on pots, stacked on pots, like just any square footage is used to grow their own food. But to just be in a space where they could see like a farm growing all of these crops that they hadn't seen just growing at that scale since they had left Korea, I think was impactful. And it just made me realize like the meaningfulness of that level of access, where they stopped even caring about if we were going to distribute boxes. They just wanted to come. They would like bring me lunch and they just show up at the farm just to spend the time there. And I think too, like in 2020, we got an emergency like grant and we did a free food CSA for like 40 families. And we used that as an excuse to build a program that was working from like a third world resistance formation, like between Korean, Vietnamese, and Filipino communities. But we did it with all families, and it was a vegetable box. And for me as a seed producer, like we're not growing like something where every week we have 12 new things to throw into a box. Like we're growing large amounts of kind of a smaller diversity of different crop varieties. But we use it as a way to do like these deep dives into the diversity that exists within some of those crops. And so we would just have a theme each month and do a box. And like one month it was all perilla, which is like something that mostly people that aren't East Asian aren't familiar with. They call all of it shiso, even though it's like a lot of different related subvarieties. Well, we gave people a box of herbs, like 5 pounds of just like a intensely bitter, strong tasting herb. But we gave them exercises and prompts, and we created like scaffolding for those families to like share recipes and stories. We had all the kids do community interviews to try to find somebody who could contextualize it. And for us, it was like a big swing because like CSA models have like increasingly moved away from being like a good model for small scale farmers, just because there's so many other like farm fresh to you type aggregators that let consumers cherry pick what you get. They tell you exactly when it's going to be dropped at your doorstep. And so we were like, we're going to go back to a CSA box. We're going to be like horribly redundant and give people like breeding material, like all this variety of summer squash. Some might be good and some might be terrible because it's all part of a breeding project. And we're also just going to like ask that people spend a lot of time with this. So we're like, we're doing things that aren't giving people as much convenience and is asking people to spend more time, which is like two things that increasingly consumers don't seem to want to do. But I maybe just because of everyone being locked down, but there was like a magic and synergy to it, where I think asking more like made people like deliver so much more. Like it just created a container to like have all of these rich conversations. And like Rupa saying like, well, no one makes okra like my mother. Like even those sorts of friendly like turf wars about like, my chili pepper is better than your chili pepper, you know, like, oh, let's bring these different varietals of crop. My perilla is better than the Vietnamese perilla. It's better than the Japanese perilla. But just the sort of like friendly competition of that just like got people super engaged. So we had kids just like coming up with like all of these beautiful oral histories of interviewing their, you know, their grandparents and community members and friends. And I think like it helped us too, because if something wasn't familiar in the box, you know, like we had a whole month of bitter melon, and it's like for the Viet and Filipino folks, it was like, you know, loaded up with tons of recipes. And I could see like my Korean community being less familiar, but just being so much more inclined to try it. Because if someone who loves that crop deeply is telling you how to cook it, they're telling you the story of how they remember it being cooked for them, it makes you want to like it. You know, like you're not going to try it in the same way as if you just cold call and pulled it off the grocery store shelf. Even if you look up a recipe, like if you have someone that's just looking at you even through the Zoom room and saying like, here I am, like I will, like bitter melon is the hill I'll die on. Like if you don't like this, you're just going to try it more. And so we had like a lot of families being like, could we re-up the bitter melon like halfway through the week? Like our kids are just like really engaged in trying to cook this every single night. So yeah, I was really happy to see that somebody's trying to ham it up down there too. So
That's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. That's just wonderful. So I want to look at a question in the chat that I think I'll open to both of you. So Elias is asking, one of the things I'm interested in is how our institutions such as schools or hospitals source their food and feed their communities. And I'm curious to hear any thoughts you have on the role that hospitals and healthcare can play in creating more nourishing food systems. So I'll start with Rupa, but I'd love to also hear Kristen's response.
Yes, that's my answer to that one. Absolutely, 1,000 times. Imagine if all of our schools and hospitals in the Bay Area sourced all of their food from local farms, or 90%. They got the mangoes and the bananas from somewhere else, but 90% of the food we could be sourcing locally. We could be providing land access and jobs to people who've been historically excluded from farming with this farming as medicine model. And we could support the livelihoods of young farmers learning how to take care of our soil and take care of the water in the peri-urban environment to feed those urban centers, right? Then what you get is the climate benefits. Like, so it offsets all the crap happening in the city. And also we should be farming in the cities where people live. We should be rewilding our urban centers so that we can grow food where we live, and that we require a lack of toxicity around where we grow our food so that we can grow healthy food for people to eat. So that will clean up the air. So absolutely hospitals should be driving this change. Unfortunately, they still have these ancient contracts with the Ciscos and these aggregators these middlemen structures that are middle person structures that again extract the wealth from the system. So if that wealth went straight from the hospital directly to the farms, imagine the kind of benefits you're seeing. I mean, I think we should be using health dollars. Right now, there's a conversation about medically tailored meals and produce prescriptions. I'm like, awesome, but where's that food going to come from? You're still actually going to be just keeping that system intact. Let's take those healthcare dollars and go straight to farmers so that they get land access, and then they get what they need to grow food successfully. Farmers should not be charged per pound of crop they produce. They should be paid the way I'm paid as a public physician. I see patients. That's what I do. I just see patients. I see you're sick, you come to the hospital, I'll see you. It's like, you're hungry, here's the food, farmers feed us. That's how they should be paid, in such a place of wealth. So absolutely, our hospitals and our schools should be partnering directly with a network of farms all around us. We should be going to the Central Valley and breaking up all those shitty toxic farms. Sorry, I'm cussing, but these farms are killing us. Like the tillage in the Central Valley has damaged the soil, like I mentioned. That releases tons of CO2 into the air. let's break up those farms. You don't need the Resnicks and their tangerine empire or almond empires. That the monocropping is killing our people. The use of those pesticides, I can't tell you how many patients I see with bizarre anaplastic thyroid cancer showing up at UCSF, bizarre lymphomas and things. Either they were working in the field or their parents were working in the fields, or they live in a place where the groundwater is polluted from the toxic residues of these pesticides. So what if those farms were broken up into 1,000 or thousands of small farms, and you give young people jobs to heal that soil and take care and grow that food in another way? So you'll get climate resiliency. Why don't we just give that land back to our California Native populations and work with them to advance what it means to live in this beautiful place in a way that will benefit everybody? So those are things that right now, as I live, someone born and raised in this area, watching the fires in the last 5 years, watching the sky turn orange, if that's not a wake-up call for all of us that we are way off course, that stuff's getting real, watching these levees break, watching the rivers swell, watching the soil run off and then get damaged through the water, we're not doing this right. And so it behooves us to reach out to California communities who are working to bring back this knowledge in their own ways. And they're bringing back fire to the forests as it needs to be. And they're bringing back these practices that kept the vitality of this space beautiful, so that when the colonizers did land in these places 200 years ago, they were shocked with how rich it was. They saw so many birds, it blackened the sky in the middle of the day because of how many birds were flying over the bay. They saw animals that were so tame, they would just walk up to the humans because they didn't see the humans as a threat. They saw the humans as relatives. I can't even imagine what that world was. I try to close my eyes and imagine, but I believe that we can learn to become in better relationship. And that starts with correcting, the erasure of indigenous communities here in the Bay and working to get land back so that they can have those spaces to practice their ways, and then we can learn how to be good guests in this land.
Great. Thank you so much for the fantastic ideas. Kristen, do you want to weigh in
I'm
on
just
this?
gonna say
Yeah.
+1 to what Rupa said. This is like entirely, like this big vision and just things that are just like so thought out. And for Rupa to just like have this deep knowledge in like these different realms, like I definitely don't know how to tackle that problem. I'm just a seed nerd here. My friend Eileen Suzara, who I think was originally asked to be on this panel, is like here helping look after my daughter so that I could participate. She wanted to give up her spot to me. And I told her, I'm going to turn my camera off and you just swap with me and then you do the talking, because she's similarly like a public health wizard. I'm someone who like lives on ramen for like 6 months out of the year during planting season. So I don't think I should speak to any public health discourse right now.
Thank you. So Rebecca also had a question that I'll read from the chat. It says, what do you think of the restriction of certified organic farms and cultivating community seed sharing and growing? And I'll turn that to Kristen first.
Yes, I know. Let's see. I think to Rupa's point, like, I think with certified organic farming, I'm not sure if this is your question, but there's like a lot of hesitation and frustration just because I think it's like so much of the conception of organics in this country is like really rooted on like the knowledge of farming in India from Sir Albert Howard, and F.H. King's travels to East Asia and China and Korea and Japan. And that really deeply informed kind of like the organic movement in this country. And then it just gets cut out, like it's unaccredited in terms of like where that composting knowledge came from, where intercropping and crop rotation came from. And then I think that a lot of the regulations now, like it's just hard that it creates mostly barriers that disproportionately impact folks, just depending on language, accessibility and scale and things like that. And then I think that's been a challenge for us too, because most of the farms we work with aren't certified organic, although they have like beyond organic practices. and that the seed is like developed for these really thoughtful systems that like are just like without any additional fertility, like really holistically kind of grown, not like, oh, it uses organic pesticide and organic herbicide, and but it still gets to be certified organic. But I think that the biggest concern for a lot of people right now is just about the seed consolidation. And I think that, you know, like we hear the big names, like everyone knows we hate Monsanto and, you know, Syngenta and all of these kind of bigger multinational players, but the role of like seed patenting and intellectual property is just like more rampant than one would expect. And it does affect kind of small scale farmers. Like if you look at a seed catalog like Johnny's, 90% of their lettuce varieties are going to have some sort of patent or plant variety protection that like precludes like any sort of additional breeding without a license agreement from that company. And sometimes even just like doing your own research and seed saving, right? And it's like, you look at those patents, like we're talking today, it's like one patent is just for red leaf color in lettuce. And it's like, who could ever have the hubris to think that you could own something like that? Like, you didn't do that. The plant did it. Tons of people stewarded it before you ever like had this notion. But I think it's the imposition of like this weird Western sort of construction of intellectual property and then our legal apparatus. Other people don't have to consent into that. Indigenous people around the world didn't consent into having like our seeds taken and then put into this weird kind of breeding and just wholly different paradigm and cosmology. And so I think there's no good answers to that right now. I think it is, but it is pretty dire. And I would recommend everybody look into just sort of the situation regarding just like how privatized the seed industry has really become. Because I do think it is going to be one of those things that the question of where these varieties that are so beloved are going, it's because like no one can propagate it outside of like a really specific licensing sort of arrangement.
Yeah, no, just to piggyback onto that, thank you for that, Kristen, is that you control the seeds, you control the people. You control the food system, you control the people. The reason why our food system has cheap food or falsely subsidized foods by the government is to keep that price low enough. And so if we have liberated food, we have liberated people. If we have liberated seeds, we have liberated people. If the people know how to grow their foods to sustain themselves, they're not going to choose the same jobs. They're going to go, I'm okay. I can feed my family. I can take care of things. And it's interesting because I went to the COP27 climate conference in Egypt to talk about this work, the farming as medicine work. And I met with agroecology colleagues from Africa. And I met with this amazing farmer who was telling me about her community where they couldn't go to market for a year during COVID, during the lockdown. There was like no market to go to. Everything was locked down. So they just turned inward and fed themselves. And for a whole year, they existed without money. And they were like, it was really challenging, but we fed ourselves. And then we were like, oh, we're actually doing fine without the money. And then what happened? The Kenyan government then made it illegal to trade seeds. Well, now why would they do that? So they create a scarcity so the farmers would get back to work to get money to buy the seed. The scarcity is manufactured under capitalism. For example, during the Irish famine, there was plenty of food. The Irish people died because it was all exported to Britain. Same with India and Africa during the late Victorian era. Millions, up to 30 million people estimated died of famine, but there was plenty of food. It was being exported to the colonial metropole. Look at the housing shortage right now. Here we have 8,000 people on the streets of San Francisco. We have thousands of open vacant units that are being used for real estate speculation. The problem is not one the problem is the problem of distribution. And so we have to recognize that it's a manufactured problem. And that if we want something different, we have to unmanufacture it. We have to build a different system. So I am very excited about the community seed saving work, the seed saving work that Kristen humbly calls herself, oh, I'm just a seed nerd, but this is the most important work of our day. Because if we are liberating our seeds, we're fundamentally liberating ourselves. And that is a really important idea. for everyone to like sit and think about. You know, food doesn't come in a styrofoam container. It comes from the earth. These seeds are relatives that our ancestors took care of for thousands of years. They don't belong to anybody. They're part of the great gift to humanity from all of our ancestors. And so they need to be stewarded and protected from these forces that want to coerce our labor, coerce us getting to work, just like my farmer friend, get to work. Now the seeds, you can't share them. So you become a fugitive if you do something that your ancestors have done for thousands and thousands of years, which is trade seeds, which is ridiculous if we think about that. And it's happened all over the world. And the US form of intellectual property is probably the most vile like version of it. And we can think of it again with the COVID vaccine. Why did 20 of my elders have to die in India when we had a vaccine? Well, the intellectual property rights of, you know, Moderna and Pfizer, they had to hold on to that patent, and the US government allowed it to happen. They could have just mandated it was open for everybody. Everyone around the world should have access to this life-saving medicine, and they didn't. They let millions of people die. There were bodies floating in the Ganges River. The skies turned black from all of the funeral pyres that were lit in India, and those were my relatives. And that is not you know, oh whoops, that's a manufactured scarcity right there. And we as people have to become courageous enough to say hell no. And it has to happen with all of us. It can't just happen with a few seed savers. We all have to get educated about this, because people will die, they will be sick. And that's what we're seeing with COVID. And I think all of us have kind of shut down because up to 20 million people have left planet Earth in the last 3 years. There's been no moment of collective grieving. There's been no let's stop, let's slow down, let's just like reevaluate what's happened. Nothing. Let's just get back to work, get back to work, get back to work. We have to insist upon our humanity. And that's something that requires resistance and the act of resisting. And so that's why our political education is so much an important part of the work we do with Deep Medicine Circle, is that this is not an error, what we're addressing. This is not like a glitch in the system. This is how the system was built. It was built to leave these people hungry. So let's build a version to feed them. Let's build something to take care of the people, take care of the seeds, liberate the food. That's why we say we're liberating the food from the market mentality. The market mentality enslaved the people. We had to fight for the abolition of slavery. And that system still exists today. So we can talk about, you know, chattel slavery doesn't exist, but look at the farm workers in California. Those are the people who were hit the hardest by COVID. Like it's urgent that we learn to become politically aware of what's happening so that we can act collectively.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I think all the points that you've been making are exactly why we're doing these webinars, right? To make sure that we're increasing awareness of these issues that are absolutely tied to injustices and that we want to rectify. So thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure for me personally, and I'm sure everybody else, to hear about all the wonderful things that you're doing and all your thoughts and creativity. And so thank you. Awesome. And now I'm going to turn it back to Lovepreet to sort of help us wrap up.
Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Rupa and Kristen, for the amazing and inspiring conversations you just gave us today. So if you could, Laura, if you want to share the slideshow. Thank you so much. If everyone could just please take a quick moment to share in the chat in one new idea you learned today that you hope to implement in your life or work. You can just drop that in the chat. Hopefully you can everyone can share and see what everyone else is learning and hopefully get more inspired. And Laura has also dropped the link to the evaluation for this survey. So if you could also please take a moment to fill that out. We will also send that later on. Probably Lucy will be the one sending that when we send the recording. So, but if you have time now, could you please take the survey? And Laura, we can go to the next slide. So what's coming up? We are almost at the end of our webinar series. So the next webinar will be on April 19th on community-led approaches to food work. And then the last thing we will have is our community gathering celebration at Stanford Educational Farm on May 18th. So we are almost wrapping up with our webinars, and we hope you learned a lot as we are learning as well. That's it. So yeah, if you could please fill out the feedback, and thank you to all our partners. So La Mesa Verde, UC Cooperative Extension, Fresh Approach, Vegilution, Santa Clara County Public Health, Western SARE, and Valley Verde.
Thank you for coming, everybody, and we'll see you next time.